Hi, folks.
Hello, hi.
Hi there.
Hi, this is Marcel.
Hello. Busy day today, lots of people here. Excellent. Tons of material to go through actually today. But before that, how is everyone? All healthy and well, I trust?
Good.
Lots
Yeah,
of
good,
thumbs up?
thank you.
I hear the vaccine is finally rolling out to people within our demographic in some locations, which is great news. Though in Japan, we're still pessimistic about having events for most of this year. We're thinking Q4, but I'm not sure what the rest of the world will be doing. So we have quite a bit to go through. What I'd like to do today is to have, in essence, an attack of your critical thinking without mercy. So the first thing is something we've done before. And it's all about the reference training material and getting ready for LF training to put it onto our online platform, onto edX. I'm just putting the link into the chat here, and I'll get to the actual editing in a second. Just show our antitrust policy notice as usual. Full policy on website. Any questions, let us know. Our counsel, Andy Updegrove, is always happy to answer them. And also, if you check him out on Amazon, you'll find his novels. He's written a series of kind of adventure mysteries. Great person. Okie dokie. So the online training, where are we at? The last time we looked at the online training, we had some information about what we could do. And we decided to basically take the current training in the slides and put it online with notes, and take the opportunity here to take these slides and update the information. Now, LF training, to put us onto edX, basically just want a giant Word document. So we've been copy pasting the slides into this giant Word document. And we have half of them in the current document, so 4 chapters out of 8. Now, Balakrishna and I coordinated earlier today, and he's going to add the next 4 shortly. But we already have a lot to go through with these slides. We have tons of very useful comments on ideas and suggestions. And what I'd like to do today is to go through one of the specific ideas to show you about some of the thinking and to be in a position to get your critical thinking. So Jeff suggested that we label the existing slides as different levels. And this would allow the online training course delivered by LF Training to have different levels of granularity. Now, we didn't quite work out the best way to do this yet. We had some different ideas. One was to go with an onion. So that level 1 is the most basic. Level 2 includes level 1, and level 3 includes the others as well. And I just took a dash at it from the perspective, and this isn't necessarily how we do it, but I took a dash at it from the perspective that we might want level 1 to cover upper management. So even C-level might take a look at this, or at least the CTO office. Level 2 is about the product managers. Again, we want them to have solid context, but quite frankly, the product managers don't have to know the nuance of some of the aspects of, let's say, linking and whatnot. And then level 3 goes to the actual engineers. Let me show you this in practice. And again, this is just for example. So intellectual property would be for absolutely everyone. But as we scroll down, I'm going to pause. Here we go. Talking about, copyleft licensing or proprietary or closed source. Delving into that might go to level 2. Now, that doesn't mean that management wouldn't have information about open source. So for instance, here I put that, management would get the copyright most relevant to software licensing and open source licenses as an overview. But they mightn't need to delve into things like permissive licenses or copyleft. That's something that probably falls to product managers to say that this fits into the product or it doesn't. And then further down, I'm going all the way down to chapter 4 here. Key concepts for open source review. Do you want to use the component, incorporation, linking, that probably belongs, or arguably belongs, with the actual people building the code. Okay, so they can tell the product manager that they had to incorporate GPL code, and the product manager will have the awareness that that's an open source license with certain terms. But the product manager doesn't actually have to know what incorporation is. They probably do, but they don't have to. And that's what I was just looking at as an example of turning this into an onion. And my concept there was simply that how do we get the busiest people furthest away from software to get a baseline? And then as people get closer and closer to actually building stuff, they have the most comprehensive knowledge and can pass it up the channel. Now that's just a concept. And I think there's two things I'd like to discuss. One, the onion idea sounds pretty good, but what do you think? And two, does the mental model of implementation here with the onion make sense, or is it really stupid? So over to the floor. Do you have any thoughts?
I think that's looking great, Shane. Yeah, I mean that works for me, and I think the example of the copyleft going into the second level. I mean, we talk about in level 1, there's an introduction that says there are different sorts of license that have different effects, and then level 2 you go further into that. So that just seems to me just to it flows through logically. It makes sense, whether you're on level 1, level 2, or level 3. That introduction slide for level 1 makes sense. So I think that this whole concept works quite nicely.
I suppose one argument against it would be that it does put the majority of the burden on the actual software development staff. It asks them to be the highest level expert in understanding these things.
Yeah, I mean, when I looked at the grid that we put into the template open source policy, we recognized that there were some areas where the developers themselves would have to have sort of deeper understanding, but the people responsible for architecture would have to have understanding in different areas. So that's not always the case, but I do appreciate that.
We've taken the approach that actually some people need that basic level, but there is nothing stopping you from saying actually it's not just the developers, but perhaps it's the developers and the compliance officer or somebody within that team who is the specialist will need to go to another level to provide that assistance. So
absolutely. That's a very good point.
like this idea of the different levels and giving people the freedom to sort of decide which individuals do I want to have as level 1, which individuals do I have to have as level 1 and 2, and different organizations, I suspect, operate differently. Organizations where they have compliance officers centralized, you really need to focus on those rather than the individual team members, for example. That would work, I think, and is scalable regardless of the size of the organization.
I suppose one optic here is that the levels can be applied. For instance, legal. You might have your general counsel glance at level 1 and then get more granular until you get to the actual IP lawyers charged with this. So anywhere you're doing it, you can get that granularity. Certainly, for instance, oh, sorry, go ahead. Hey, Alexis.
Yeah, like to adding to what Sami was saying. So basically, I've seen that some companies, they do have policies that basically the developers, they don't need to know that much. But whenever, the policy says that if you are going to, use any, let's say, open source component, you need to talk with, I don't know, the head of the engineering. Yeah. So then the head of the engineering, he or she needs to know stuff. And then the developers, they just, do the development stuff, and then whenever they have any questions, they need to go and ask. So I've seen that as well. So then in that level, the level 3 would go to the head of the engineering or whoever it is, and then basically the developers, they might be just level 1 in this case. But again, it's per organization.
Yeah. So the branding will be level 1, level 2, level 3, and not for executives, managers, or developers, right? And then we'll let everyone decide how they want to roll it out.
Yep. So
yeah, for me, the onion thing, I understand the onion concept, but I'm wondering if we should be also providing some of the information at a high level from, for example, level 3 up to the level 2, or maybe even the level 1. So, it's not quite as discrete as onion peels, onion layers, but maybe there's some kind of a more fuzzy overlay. And
what I'd suggest, if it's at all possible with the training course, perhaps to address this, would be that it should be possible for people to switch in and out. Do you think? If you know what I mean. They could be going through level 1 and think, I've got a disconnect here. I need more data, and switch quickly to level 2 to get that data further. And if they need to keep on going, they can go and see level 3. Would that address it?
it might, but you might have at some levels, they need to at least know, have some inkling of what the terms mean, because they're going to hear those, and without having to dive into a whole different level and all the complexities of it.
Right. So, for example, in the slides that you showed, level 2 has one slide for permissive licenses, one for copyleft, right? Does level 1 have, hey, there are 2 kinds, permissive and copyleft, or something like that? Or they're not mentioned at all at level 1?
Yes, yeah. No, absolutely, and I mean, there's a sort of part in there that does say that licenses have different conditions attached to them. So I think it's a question of just following the flow through, isn't it? So that it is just this consistent story, so that you always, once you move to level 2, you've already had the base information that you need in level 1 to so that you understand what's going on in level 2, and then likewise when you move to level 3.
Personally, it is important to actually say, if you want more information, you need to go to level 2, rather than sort of say the interlink is here, or let's keep it at a basic level, because I suspect different people would want to go into different depth. So as long as in the slide where you talk about licenses, as long as there is a reference you can link into level 2 to be able to get more information, that would work better. Because the minute you start to go sort of slightly provide the interlinking, you very quickly need to go and deep dive to explain what the differences are and how they can be different.
It's beginning to sound, speculation, that we might need a glossary which links into things, terminology glossary that's as compact as possible, but people can immediately click. If they look at permissive open source, they might see a very short sentence on it. They can click and they can get to the level 2 slide.
Yep. Agreed.
I'm still not absolutely, and by the way, I didn't introduce myself. I arrived after the beginning of the call. So hi, I'm Gilles, based out of Geneva. For those who don't know me, I'm sort of wondering why we would need these levels. I mean, it's not a lot of information, and for me, distinguishing the various kind of license, permissive, reciprocal, weak copyleft, strong copyleft, is all very basic stuff. And
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that we don't necessarily need to have different levels for this distinction. Now, the different levels could be, the copyleft licenses look at linking, and what does linking mean, and that gets really tricky. And this is probably for level 2 or level 3. And we could limit in level 1, saying that in copyleft licenses, code that is linked is impacted by the license, and leave it at that. And if you want to know more, let's look at more in depth what linking means, or bundling, because that's very often the term that's used. So, but I would, the categories of license.
my greatest concern would be that in attempting to talk to a C-level executive on this, if we take too long, they're going to throw the quarterly report at our heads.
To be quite honest with you, you also have to think, I mean, we faced this challenge when we rolled out to over 5,000 ARM employees. You know, this is 5,000 people's time. So if you have a significant amount of material to go through, you will get quite a lot of pushback, and quite rightly so, because, you know, why would an exec need to know this distinction between a copyleft license and a permissive license, or why would they just need to know that this is open source, or, you know, so I think it's a real challenge, and we need to keep the material, dividing it into the different levels, give you that opportunity to sort of decide to what level. You know, we took the approach with our legal team, for example. They had to do all of the training material because we wanted to make sure that they know what the developers are being told, regardless of what the execs have been told. So we took that approach that actually we need that consistency. Therefore, the compliance team or the legal team have to know everything that has been told, so that when they receive a query, they have a better understanding as to why somebody is raising a question.
I suppose what this is teasing out, to Mary and G's point, we have to make the ability to deep dive really, really good. But we have to have a way to do the elevator pitch, the 5 minutes, and then the actual details. So, yeah. I mean, if we, sorry, go ahead. My apologies.
What I've been wondering with what Mary said is, wouldn't it make sense to enhance our mental model, not from the onion, but say it's more like a chromatic wheel? So we have the different sections, colors, whatever, and there are levels to each of the sections, and they mix in some kind of way, so that you can say this type of player or person in my company needs this topic with this and that depth, so that we can more, let's say, mix and match. It's not strict levels, it's more like mix and match in different levels. Or would this model just, let's say, blow everything away?
I would honestly be a little concerned that people might get lost.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's also because I can't think of how to make that model. Tell you what, this document is loaded with great comments. Only a few are related to this kind of onion idea. How about I create a secondary document which attempts to implement the glossary and the choice structure, so that we can have a kind of run through on the next call and determine, did that run through make sense for us, or is it inadequate? And we can scrap the whole thing if we need to.
Yeah. I don't think we'll need to scrap the whole thing, but.
Yeah, don't scrap it, but
yeah,
a glossary I think will really make sense.
Some poor soul has to put that together, and that's me.
So sorry, Shane.
No, actually, it's going to be good. I think that will be the first time that in the context of an open source standard that we'll have a standardized glossary. So it's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a ton more comments on this document, which I would love for people to go through. But on this call, I want us to do some other stuff as well. So I'm going to hit pause on this document and suggest, if at all possible, the link is in the chat. And if people could have a look at the comments and comment on the comments, that would be tremendously useful for resolution within 2 weeks for the next call. I mean, if everyone actually just commented on one comment, I think that would cover all the bases we need to complete the merge of those comments. Separately, I will build a document with the test glossary and levels to see if that mental model works and if we can think of a better mental model as needed. Right. Now, the next part should be uncontroversial. pulling up my little slides. We're going to talk about the onboarding slides, which were created by Nathan over at Qualcomm, which was just fantastic, just fantastic. And we had the original slides in 2017, but Nathan took some time, a little while back, to come up with a new version of the slides, and I would deeply appreciate your opinion of them. I'm putting a link into the chat, which is directly to the actual document, but I'm going to open the document here. So the difference between our onboarding slides and the general introduction to OpenChain is that this is meant to actually encourage companies for direct adoption. It's meant to be their first guide. So we have essentially a criticism of the supply chain with the optic of compliance to start off, saying that we waste time on recreating processes. It moves on to promoting OpenChain as reducing friction. So it's a very simple concept that we do that. And then it begins to run into the path to conformance, explaining how to do that. And it goes through a few different things on this. The first is the general overview of what program you must have, what kind of documentation, what type of oversight. So these are ripped out of the core of the standard. And naturally, they don't constitute any details of the standard, but they do cover the bird's eye. This continues to pointing out the reference material to help catch people, things like the open source policy template and the slide deck for the training program. And then we direct people into the online community, so they land there. And after that, we talk about how people can certify. And that's done in two ways at this juncture. The first is the self-certification, and the second is talking about how to work with partners. Okay, so this flow worked for us in the past, and I believe that it's still a viable workflow. What I'm not sure is if our language here is correct for what you need and what your your supplier companies need. Okay, we might have to improve how we describe this stuff. We might have to make a fundamental change. For instance, the simplest change would just be put ISO everywhere. That's one example of a very simple thing. But other things, for instance, self-certification. Is this self-certification questionnaire description adequate? Would your suppliers read that and comprehend what they're meant to do? So this slide deck, I would very much appreciate if people could put eyes on, with the perspective that their procurement departments might be asking for ISO 5230 conformance and sending this deck to the supplier to get them started. I think Nathan has done a fantastic job, also building on other people's work. But now it's to the community to see how we make this right, to email to the suppliers and for them to be just fine. I'm going to send this to our main mailing list and our education mailing list. And I truly would like you to help. And even fundamental things, the path to conformance, how to adopt the standard. The first thing we've got here is review the standard. But is that truly what we need people to do in this juncture? Do we just want to send them to the self-certification questionnaire at this juncture so they see in plain English or plain Japanese the yes, no questions? I think that's the stuff we need to noodle on. And we need to get it right, because we can't give hefty documents to the suppliers, but they are going to face this in procurement contracts. So we do need to make this as good as possible. Just pausing here, throwing it open to the room to see if there's any initial opinions or comments.
On the question of replacing OpenChain with ISO 5230, wouldn't this be really detrimental for the OpenChain brand? If we start talking about, conformance to the standard, and this is the standard, and yeah, and never mentioning OpenChain again.
Well, that's a good point. And because we do essentially control our ecosystem through the OpenChain trademark.
Yeah.
One thing I have seen is people referring it to OpenChain as OpenChain 5230,
yeah,
which might be a nice compromise between using the weight of ISO while maintaining our branding.
I agree with that. I think we really must retain the OpenChain bit in that sort of to continue to raise awareness. I suspect that particularly those who deal with a lot of ISO standards, it gets a little bit confused, particularly if you're talking to you know, execs in this with a supplier, sort of at the more senior level. You really need to have sort of that OpenChain stick to these discussions.
I would personally prefer to just refer to anything OpenChain standard in the initial slide, explain, yeah, this is an ISO standard under this number, but yeah, we're talking now about OpenChain, right? It's published under ISO, but yeah.
That raises an interesting topic with regards our branding. So we have our primary logo, but we also have other things like our certification logo and so on. Maybe that type of branding should be prominent in this document, essentially to show the different branding we use in different contexts as well.
Yeah, so the question is, do you want your supplier, are you going to be telling your suppliers you should follow ISO 5230, or I want you to be OpenChain compliant?
That's probably a question for our partner lawyers and service providers. What are you doing to your poor clients? Silence on the line. I suspect, from what I've heard in the background, that including the ISO number in the contract will be the easiest thing for procurement. So it's likely on implementation, it'll be the ISO number, along with other ISO numbers like 9001, 26262, and so on. But I'm going to have to defer to the market knowledge on this because that's only based on casual conversations. I don't know what law firms are helping their clients do. I don't know what the companies individually are doing. So if there's any way we could have generalized feedback on that, it could be very useful in determining how we position this.
Just if right now would write a quotation regarding, let's say, consulting or any kind of assessment, I'd incorporated both. I'd reference to the OpenChain version that we'd like to go to and the standard numbering, so that there's both. And I think regarding certificates or reports, the market will show what will be the strongest one. But as I know, let's say at least my customers, they will have or will want to have both on their documentation.
This raises an adjacent point, and thanks very much, Alexis, for opening this conversation. Our conformance logo is currently here. This is our current conformance logo, which puts the OpenChain brand front and center and essentially references ISO below. Is that the right general direction for our conformance logo? Should we have a different look and feel to it to fit better into the market? I mean, this is, I think, something we should probably discuss here.
If I look at the logo the way it is right now with the ISO written under 2.1, I understand this to mean that OpenChain 2.1 is the ISO standard, but if there's a 2.2, it might not be the ISO standard. If you plan to always have the new iterations of OpenChain to be automatically ISOified, I would just put ISO under OpenChain and not under 2.1.
Ah, interesting point. 2.1 is identical to the ISO standard. And at the moment, there's no intent to iterate the standard in the next few years, perhaps half decade. Though we are
in which case, in which case I would leave it like that. And you might have an OpenChain 2.2 coming up soon, which won't be the ISO standard.
Yeah. We're not likely to have an OpenChain 2.2 or 3.0 for quite a few years. At the moment, there is feedback on iterations of the standard, and the discussion is open, naturally. But the primary market demand appears to be to provide optional extensions, in effect, descriptive documents explaining how you can use OpenChain in the context of security or M&A. So it looks like we won't be touching the ISO standard for quite a while.
Okay.
Is there a version number on the ISO standard?
No, just saying it's ISO. So from ISO's perspective, we just handed them the industry standard at the current lock point, and then they just converted it. They're not, at this juncture, if I recall correctly, referencing back to us OpenChain 2.1. That was a branding decision on our part to indicate that the ISO formatting was different from OpenChain 2.0. But it's not ISO. So hypothetically then, I suppose we could just say OpenChain and then the ISO number. We don't necessarily need the 2.1 branding per se.
Yeah, although that will lead to confusion on the those who certified to earlier versions which were not ISO standard, which people can do because you can go and certify to 1.2 and 2.0, for example.
That's a valid point. And there are some companies which are underway in 2.0, and they have not given an indication yet whether they'll move to 2.1, which they don't need to do because 2.1 is still going to meet the ISO requirements, just not with the exact same formatting.
That's right. Some organizations prefer to go through a formal certification process before they start sort of referencing the ISO, despite sort of knowing that they meet all the commitments.
In this way, we can probably expect some companies to self-certify internally and then go get a third-party certifier.
Yeah,
I think we saw that to some degree with Hitachi and Tubsud in the past. Okay.
One thing I might do here is just looking at it is make the 2.1 smaller and make the ISO part bigger. So it kind of reinforces and gives some weight to OpenChain.
I agree.
The version is there so for reference, but I'd like to see the ISO more prominent.
And then hypothetically, if OpenChain 3.0 was released, but not yet an ISO standard, it would be more visually understandable with a glance where your supplier is at. Okay, that's useful branding information. And just for context, to see we're on the same page here, we would put that in the onboarding slides more prominently so that companies would get that as soon as they conform, they get to use that logo and so on throughout. We don't actually have that displayed in the onboarding slides at the moment, which is probably an omission on our part because we're too down in the woods. Okie dokie, that's pretty good. Next topic, if that's all right.
Sorry, Shane, just one other thing. When you were talking about what would you send to your supplier, I think there needs to be a bit more context to what OpenChain is at the beginning. Because I think, not every supplier will be immediately familiar with what OpenChain is. So you need to sort of just explain what it is and what OpenChain is aiming to do.
That's a really good point, and it dovetails perfectly into the next topic. So the next topic actually is where we can steal those slides. We have updated overview slides for OpenChain. And for those of you who are familiar with the project, we basically release updated slides every 2 or 3 months. It's often catching more conformants and members and so on. And the current version of the slides provide, and I'm just going to get the sharing link and put it into our chat just in case people. So this will allow you to edit as well as view. Okay, so the current version of the slides provide you with a bird's eye overview from saying that we do the key requirements of a program, true to this pyramid, which I'm not exactly totally sold on, but let's come back to that, talking about how we're high level. And then, defining inflection points, and then company by company in the supply chain. It fixes stuff, our ISO status, our conformance logo, and then it goes on to the platinum members, the conformant organizations, generation 1 conformance, and the community. Now, before I proceed, it sounds like we might be able to take this chunk of material or similar and put that into the supplier onboarding slides to set context. Would that be adequate, Sammy, or do we need to be more information dense?
I was just thinking a shorter summary, to be honest with you. I wouldn't increase it by multiple slides. I think sort of just an overview of what OpenChain is and what it's aiming to do. And I was thinking more a single slider with, again, you can point people to these other set of slides, but I think as an initial summary, so that somebody opens the other slides and say, yeah, okay, I know, yes, this is meaningful to me.
As it happens,
it's one I prepared earlier.
there is a potential one-slide summary of the project, and big credit to Nathan for pulling a lot of this together and getting this done. And I finessed it in some directions for some companies. So maybe that single slide with some improvements could do the job for us. I
mean, I would just add a single bullet point that OpenChain is aiming to improve open source license compliance across the supply chain.
Right. I got a new keyboard recently and I love it so much, which is a strange obsession. Supply chain. There we go. Typing is much nicer nowadays. Okay, so I'll noodle on that slide a bit. And if everyone's got the link, I think, oh no, I'll send you the link for this slide as well. Yeah. So this particular slide is almost ready to go. It's right there.
So yeah, this is something for new, when we first mention OpenChain to new people who do not know it yet.
Yeah.
Okay, then I would delete the OpenChain 2.0 in the first. Let's not delve into the past. This is what we're doing. Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. If people are brand new, they're not going to be working on OpenChain 2 or before.
Yeah, right. We don't want them, right? Ideally, yes. Focus your efforts in 2.1.
The latest.
That's a really good point. All righty. I mean, that makes sense. So we can basically drop the final version of this into our introduction to OpenChain, along with our along with our information about the conformance logo and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, why not just do it now? Hypothetically, I'm having a crisis with my shared slides. There's so many slides. We just add the slide as maybe the first slide here. How does that work? That's weird. Okay. I would add the overview as the first slide when people land. And then perhaps during the path to conformance, we go to the logo after that and tell them this is on the table that they can use. Does that work for everyone? We're getting lots of plans here. I love it. Okay, so back to the overview slides, which are definitely functional. I mean, we've used them a lot and people seem to understand what we're doing. Where people might want to put eyes on is just beyond the reference material. We basically go through that. We've got loads of reference material, a bunch of it's on the site, and then there's a huge corpus of information, about 1,000 documents on GitHub. Then we start covering the partner program, and we just list the law firms, service providers, and vendors. And then we talk about global availability of certification, and then freedom of choice. The next part, which I think we'll need eyes on, and I don't think in this call, but the slide 22 to 25, where we try to describe self-certification, independent compliance assessment, third-party certification, and then we do the global summary again of the project. I'd really appreciate if the partners could take a quick look at the independent compliance assessment and the third-party certification slides. I'm just going to put the link into this chat once again so people have it. The reason I'd appreciate it is to, this is the latest link for that slide. The reason I'd appreciate it is to make sure that as we talk about the service you provide, we're talking about it with the right optics. Okay, so independent compliance assessment, it seems straightforward here, but if there's any improvements, it would be useful to have them soon, because these are the wordy parts of the slide, and I'm going to have them translated into about 10 languages. So it's a case of, as my grandmother would say, speak now or forever hold your peace. Now, I don't mean that literally, in that I don't mean right now, but please do it in the next couple of weeks, okay? So I can actually get the translations underway. Ideally, if the partners could have a look at this and come back to me by next Tuesday, that will be fantastic. And then I can put the country teams on translation.
Shane?
Yeah.
Second line has a typo, was has to be way.
Ah!
That was the easy part.
Catch. You get a t-shirt. Contact Jenny and it will be sent straight away. This is great. And for the whole project, slide 25 might be the key. This is where we try to capture everything important, including normative references. You know, basically saying we're putting self-certification front and center. And I just raised that because on our mailing list, we had quite a few discussions about this in the last couple of days. And it's clearly very important that we communicate again and again our intent as a project and as an ISO standard. So if everyone could potentially take a look at this slide and consider whether it's fair and effective to describe the status and intent of the project. I'm going to mail these slides to the mailing list, but it might not arrive to all of you. This slide deck is 13.4 megabytes, so it mightn't get through your filters. Recommend you use the link I put in the chat last. But yeah, I mean, I think these slides are pretty solid. This wordy part is new. The rest of the slides is pretty self-explanatory, with one exception that's been bugging me for months. I don't know if we should keep this slide. The intent was to describe OpenChain as the top level of process management, and then you do bill of materials and tooling. But somehow the slide seems to exclude options. You know, we don't have all the tools listed. We don't have all the software bill of materials listed. What do you think we should do here?
Maybe have some wording that says that those are examples that we provide for reference.
Make sure it's non-prescriptive. Yes, good point.
Are these open?
Yeah, these are all
source tools for handling of open source?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we could say that as well.
I'm just going to put in those two things right away. Ooh. And I guess just down here at the bottom, I'll put in Maybe the reference point is pretty good. Should we put it up here? Should it be prominent or down here?
Put an asterisk and then write it really, really, really small, like the fine print in a contract, you know. No, but no. That said, it should be quite visible because we don't want anybody to feel offended that they're not included in here. It's more of a, you know, example members of the ecosystem or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, OpenChain, SPDX are clearly part of the LF suite of projects and elements. The rest, not necessarily.
Right.
I kind of think this is a bad idea. I look at this and it says, oh, I've got to do a lot of stuff, which actually, in my first go of doing an open chain like solution, will have none of those things. At least none of these specific tools. I don't need to use SPDX. Okay, I understand that people do, especially big companies. I understand the reason why they do it. And the same with all of the tools on the bottom, but it's not necessary. And it looks scary.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And I don't think you want to imply that people have to use any of these tools, which even if you're saying that they're for reference, still looks scary. I think it's the wrong impression, but that's my personal viewpoint.
It's an interesting point, Martin, because it is valid that no one has to use a bill of materials or a scanning tool to become OpenChain conformant. They simply have to have a way to identify the software and so on. Other thoughts from everyone else?
Well, how about calling these tools open source tools that may help you?
Maybe providing them as a list rather than as a pyramid.
Yeah, that too.
Oh, basically doing differently. We already have this actually well documented in the open source tooling group about what tools do what. So you just need to actually use it, what there in the extra slide, that what is available in open source to help to achieve this, but not necessarily you can use it differently ways.
Yeah, I think something like this slide is useful, but probably like nearer the end rather than slide 3.
Yes.
You've learned all of this, and here's some stuff that you may look at because you'll find it useful and help your compliance activity.
That's an interesting point. What do the rest of you think about that? It sounds like some very good points to me.
Yeah, I agree that putting it at the end is much better than at the beginning.
And if we go a bit listy on it, so it looks less like we're going to be prescriptive about, you have to use X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And perhaps be a bit more wordy. So for instance, top level process management.
It's so dangerous because even this list of open source tools that you have is already outdated. We have so many extra tools that appears already there.
So maybe we, instead of trying to have all the tools, can have very few, 1 or 2, and just say that there's a lot more tools. And
no.
The slide of tools.
No, it creates more problems then. Because how actually you benefit one or another, and how actually you justify give visibility of one and not the other one. There's no way.
So again, this slide describes the tools as the link says that Linux Foundation is involved in, right?
Yeah, pretty much, except reuse software, which is another open project. Oh wait, I don't think we've got org.
Yes, there is. They're all part of ACT, right? So yeah. Because
we don't want to favor any particular tool, should we omit the tools and just reference that there are open source tools for open source compliance, as well as proprietary tools for open source compliance available, and then link into a more complete description, for instance, the tooling group's map?
I think what Shane you say that's my line of thought, that we can just put the open source tools and commercially available tools and reference that you can use whatever you wish to make your bill of materials, for example.
Yes, because it's like the way that the slide is put it is, let's say, is wrong company requirements. You are putting technical requirements inside the functional requirements.
Yeah.
So the company needs you need to explain that to achieve, you need to get the bill of materials. The resulting things need to be the bill of materials, SPDX, or related documents. How you achieve these documents is not exactly the way that you should tell them. So the byproduct is our intention, not the way to go to the byproduct.
Yep, good point.
And for example, where is for SW360 on this list? It's not. Clearly, is one of the most important everything. So see, it's easy to make a mistake.
Foundation, right?
Yeah, it's Eclipse.
Yeah. Yes, but the question is that we are talking about providing this. There's an open chain for everyone, and even talking about proprietary tools. So why actually Eclipse is not valid? See?
Yep. So maybe we just described that. Now, I am inclined to keep SPDX there because it is cited in the OpenChain standard as an example of software bill of materials.
And reuse as well, you can put in there, for example, reuses and the one type of information that people, so this is the byproduct is completely fine to put in here. How they get to the byproduct, whatever they use in some proprietary tool or open sourcing tool, it's fine. In the end, in the end of the slides, then you can actually suggest that this open source tools is available if you want to take a look. That's it.
Yeah.
And like said, one don't need to use any of those tools because if you just keep good database on whatever you incorporate to your code, you have it.
You can do even by hand if you are insane enough, but it's still valid.
That's it was just funny. I was just thinking that some companies are using Excel spreadsheets with a variant of SPDX. So I have a sneaking suspicion they're going manually on this.
I can tell you there's more than some.
Shane, I'm sorry, I haven't followed the whole discussion, but I've heard that some people already suggested to put this slide rather to the end, and I would also go with this suggestion because, I mean, basically we start with OpenChain and try to explain OpenChain, and then directly jumping to bill of materials and further tooling is
it's too much.
Quite a stretch, I think. And also here, when we write top-level process management, for me, OpenChain is a compliance management system, like it's mentioned on the slide before, where it says requirements for quality open source compliance program. So we shouldn't reduce OpenChain to just processes. I think the whole standard is a compliance management system, which is described and set up. But again, I think this slide would rather go to the end, because when we talk about what it incorporates, like the compliance management system, it's not only the bill of materials and some tools, it's all the other stuff which is described in the standard as well, which we then currently don't mention on this slide here. So therefore, for me, this picture is not complete when we say, okay, this is OpenChain, and then we have something about bill of materials and some tools. It's not a complete picture of a compliance management system, and neither of OpenChain, I guess.
That's a really good point. I'm just going to move this slide towards the end. I'm going to put it near the freedom of choice for customers and suppliers. What do you think? And put it directly after that.
Yeah, somewhere this direction, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put it provisionally there, and I'm going to just note that this slide and its position, so this is now slide 21, this is what we need to edit. This is where we need to go. If people can look at slide 21 and slide 25. So 25 is our summary description, and then it's sort of a mission statement, just noting we're user companies for user companies. But 25 is like our overarching context. Again, you went through everything. Here's our context. And 21 is trying to explain how we fit into the universe. I think Marcel is onto something. Compliance management system sounds like a good start to contextualize how we make this slide, but it needs your brains to do it. Would it be okay to put it down as a task for us to try to have in place for the next call? And creative thinking. I mean, people can make a duplicate of the slide below and just do something completely different. What we need is to work out what's best.
Yeah, we can bring in a suggestion regarding compliance management system, how we could set it up, and what would be the elements of that, and which are covered by OpenChain. And happy to see other suggestions.
I'm really glad we started talking about this because that pyramid was irritating me. I was feeling it was deficient, and it's great. We're going to fix it. All right, everyone, we're running out of time, so I'm going to throw open the floor for any other business. Oh,
nobody like PRM this scheme, so right?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Any other business, colleagues and friends? Okay. If there's no further business, we have our action items. Action item 1, just resharing for complete clarity. We want to try to close off the comments in the reference training document. Action item 2, we want to improve our one-slide overview. And that's for the purpose of putting it into our supplier education slide, which incidentally, we also need to consider if that's good enough. And then finally, with the main thing, we want to replace the pyramid with something very beautiful, and we want to make sure the project description is okay. I'm going to consolidate this with the editing links into an email. But it sounds like if we put this together, we will have adequate information to just hand off to suppliers so they know what they're doing from the OpenChain perspective. I mean, naturally, partners and so on have much more comprehensive material regarding their individual solutions.
Would it make sense? I'm just thinking out loud here because you said something about, was it slide, not 25, but I think it was 21. No, where was it?
There's self-certification.
No, you were saying slide 26 is kind of like a vision statement.
Oh, yeah.
Well, why don't we make that really clear in the first 2 slides? OpenChain's vision is and OpenChain's mission is.
So we might take that slide and dump it immediately before or after this one.
Our vision, OpenChain is run by user companies for user companies. These, not this, these companies are collaborating to create clear, shared, and effective approaches to that's our vision statement.
Sure.
And the mission statement could actually be slide 25, something like that. No, it's not actually, no, it's not. That's not a mission. Well, the mission would be to say, to turn it around, we provide the freedom of choice to enable blah, blah, blah. That's the mission. If you look at slide 25.
Mm-hmm. I'll just pull this down to slide 25 here, or 26.
No, 26, yeah. If you turn it around, if you start by, we seek to provide the freedom of choice to enable, that becomes a mission.
Right. That is definitely something for the community to mull on, that would put that first. And I think it could work. And what I'm going to do adjacent to this, I'm going to pull the official project charter out and the official mission statement in the charter.
Yeah,
make sure
so that it's coherent.
Exactly. All right. plenty paperwork for me and wonderful work from all of you. I just want to say thank you so much. We've done so much on this call. And I wish you a safe and happy day. Well,
Thank you very much.
You too.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Shane. Bye, everyone.
Everyone,
Bye.
bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
For your
Bye,
time.
everybody.
Goodbye.